I'm sorry? Oh, yes, very well. And how about yourself? Where'd he go? There he is. Don't let go to his hand.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our briefing on Sindh. We'd like to welcome today Congressman Adam Schiff from California's. He is actually the first member of the Congressional Sindh Caucus, and it is a huge supporter of Sindh. And we are very pleased to have him today. He also spoke yesterday at our annual conference. So I'd like to welcome Congressman Schiff to come and give a few remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you this morning, have a chance to greet you. I very much enjoyed having dinner last night with some of the leadership and members of the new Sindhi Caucus, and I saw your wonderful presentation, which I'm delighted you'll be providing again today. This is obviously a critical time for U.S.-Pakistani relations. It's an even more critical time for the Sindhi community, now facing the second of two devastating years of flooding. One of the most intense humanitarian crises around the world. And unfortunately, the assistance hasn't been up to the scale of the problem. A lot of the aid that the United States and other countries have pledged has not materialized, and we are simply too slow in responding to this crisis. There are some estimates that areas will be underwater for half a year. The crop devastation, the loss of cattle, the loss of life has just been devastating. And this is, I think, an important opportunity for us to strategize about how to make our relief to this region more effective, more efficient, and provide it rapidly. One of the things I talked about last night was some years ago, after the devastating earthquake in northwest Pakistan, I had a chance to visit that region, and in talking with people there, it was quite apparent how much it meant to them that the United States was so aggressive in providing assistance. Much of it delivered with military helicopters. In fact, the Pakistanis told me that shortly after that relief effort, one of the most popular gifts for kids in Pakistan was a little model of a helicopter, an American helicopter, because it had become synonymous with relief to people. Now, there aren't many places in the world where an American helicopter is a positive symbol, but it shows the power, the lasting power of providing help when help is really needed. And we have that need and that obligation and that opportunity in dealing with the flooding in Sindh. So I look forward to the briefing today to help folks here on the Hill have a better understanding of the region, a better understanding of the Sindhi people and the extraordinary level of tolerance among the Sindhi community, something we're seeing in short supply around the world these days. One of the most distressing events of the last couple of years for me take place in Pakistan. One of the most discouraging events, I mentioned this briefly last night, was the assassination of the governor of Punjab, someone who had spoken out against the anti-blasphemy laws, and his reward was being killed by his own bodyguard. As distressing as that act was, what followed was even more distressing. And what followed was tens of thousands of people taken to the streets of Pakistan to protest in favor of the assassin. And when you see things like that happening, you wonder, how we're progressing in the war of ideas, and at times it seems like not very far. And in that context, The tolerance, the broad-mindedness of the Sindhi people stands as a great example for the rest of Pakistan and for the broader region, and that is something that we should embrace, and is desperately needed not only in that part of the world but all around the world. So I look forward to getting to know the community better, and look forward to the presentations today, and thank you, Manwar, for inviting me to join. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Congressman, for your comments and your support. I'd like to just say a few words before I introduce the panelists. When most Americans think about Pakistan, they think about a country which is lawless. There's a lot of fanaticism in which terrorists thrive. It's the country that harbored Osama bin Laden. But what we fail to realize is that there's more to Pakistan than that.
I think that's on. Can you on?
There's more to Pakistan than terrorism and lawlessness and corruption. There is a huge community of Sindhis in the southern part of Pakistan that has always believed in religious tolerance, in peace, and in hard work. This is a minority group in Pakistan that is, the Sindhi language is different from the language spoken by the majority of Pakistanis. Sindh is also the province where the majority, or almost all of the Pakistan's Hindus reside. There are Hindus in Pakistan, non-Muslims, and it's also one of the most impoverished and most illiterate parts of Pakistan. Pakistanis, the Sindhis in general, share American values. They share the vision of hard work, earning a living, and they are natural allies. We provided tons of aid to Pakistan over the years, but most of that aid did not trickle down to Sindh. Even the floods that the Congressman spoke about most recently, we did provide a lot of aid, and some aid did get to Sindh, but unfortunately, much of it did not. And in addition to that, there are reports that the Hindus in Sindh were discriminated against in terms of getting aid. So there were issues there as well. In addition, it was pointed out, in fact, at yesterday's conference that the U.S. Department of State doesn't have any Sindhi-speaking employees who can actually read the Sindhi press and communicate directly with the Sindhis. And in fact, they are their views of Pakistan and of Sindh are tainted by what they read in the Urdu and the English media. So I urge, first of all, thank you everyone for coming here and trying to learn more about Sindh and issues of Sindh, but also I urge you to see what we can do to help the Sindhi community, because by helping the Sindhis, we're helping a group that would be staunch supporters of the United States in every way, and would help us counter terrorism and help us in the fight against terrorism in that region. Today we have a panel of three speakers. There's Dr. Haider Nizamani. He is a political science professor at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, and is a postdoc fellow at the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies at the Monterey Institute of International Studies. From 2001 to 2003, he was a Global Security and Cooperation Fellow of the Social Science Research Council at UBC's Institute of International Relations, as well as a visiting fellow at the Sustainable Development Policy Institute in Islamabad. He will be speaking today about the flooding in Sindh and also the nature of the U.S. and Pakistan relationship and discuss possible responses. Thank you, Dr. Nizamani.
Thank you very much.
And I will just, first of all, echo what Congressman just said about some not so pleasant developments or happenings in Pakistan, particularly in reference to Governor Qasi's brutal assassination. And I'll just add two very small points to it, which in fact maybe are not that small. One is that you're kind of absolutely right that as tragic as it was, the assassination, what was even more worrisome was thousands of people kind of turning up to support a cold-blooded murderer. But in that sense, again, I would like to, if we disaggregate Pakistan, after Salman Taseer's murder, it was in several cities and towns of Sindh province where there were public protests against the murder. So something that in many cities in central Pakistan or northern Pakistan, even if people wanted to do, because of that climate, they would come out. But in Hyderabad, which is kind of the second largest city in Sindh and other Sindh cities, there were protest marches kind of condemning the murderer. And just to kind of add on to it, just to kind of add maybe misery to that family, it was just a few weeks back, his son, Salman Taseer's son, was kidnapped in Lahore during broad daylight and is yet to be recovered. So again, I mean, like this is what we can say. Well, this is what we call Pakistan in many ways. Anyway, what I'm going to kind of say, trying to be very brief and focus on a number of key questions, or what I consider to be key questions. The first question that I wanted to address, but I think I'll leave it to Veer and Professor Glenn to talk about in some detail, is the nature and extent of destruction that the recent floods have brought about. But then these other questions that I would like to address and try to answer. One is that why does such humanitarian crises, why they don't make it into the narrative or discourse of Pakistan-US relations? Why is it? I mean, even if we take the coverage, I was just looking at, I mean, just out of curiosity, I just looked at kind of say the floods. Pakistan did the Google search of New York Times and Washington Post of past 3 months. Again, very limited coverage of it. There's a lot of coverage on Pakistan, but why is it that humanitarian crises of this proportion, where about 8 million people, and that's I think pretty much bigger than whole kind of the New York City or so. Displaced, millions of people homeless. It doesn't make it into Pakistan-US relations discourse. And last question would be that what role, if any, that the United States can play to mitigate such disasters and how it can kind of address these issues. Again, I'm like that will be more kind of the wish list on my part. In terms of the crisis, of course, I mean, like I said, there are many facts and figures which, as I said, that Keith would highlight on. What I would simply kind of focus on or concentrate is that unlike last year's floods, this year's floods, they have literally, I mean, like I said, literally hit home, I mean, like I said, personally for me. My village, a village that I grew up in, I was there in late July. And at that time, I'm like, here's a village in an area which is agricultural heartland of the country. It is, so you have all kinds of cash crops from cotton, sugarcane to wheat. You have mango and banana orchards. And the people there, they were talking about the kind of almost ready to be picked cotton crop, a bumper cotton crop that was the talk of the village and that area in late July. And I came back to Canada in the first week of August. And that was, I think, the month of Ramadan, the fasting month. So, and the people were talking about all the kind of celebrations at the end of that month and all that. Little did they know that probably unlikely things and their lives will not be the same by the end of that month. And when these rains, they hit, as a result of, there are about 3,000 people in my village. Out of those, 750 people, they had to take shelter in pretty much kind of the makeshift arrangements in local schools if they could find any shelter or other places. And many of them are still living that life of displacement. All those great, wonderful bumper crop that people were waiting for. I'm sure, some of the pictures that you will see from other areas, the area that I come from is no different. It is like a big pool of water. So this is, and these are the people, we're talking about a society where there is no concept of crop insurance. Whatever these people had, whether it was cattle or crop, they have lost it. And again, in a country of marked contrast, you can get, of course, car insurance in Pakistan. You can get even insurance against kidnapping in Pakistan. So the insurance company will pay the ransom in case you are kidnapped. But a country which relies so much on agriculture, it doesn't have the notion or the concept of crop or cattle insurance. So imagine how vulnerable these people's lives are. And so in that situation, when you look at the United States and what its role has been in humanitarian crisis, again, it has been kind of almost either kind of very marginal or not that prominent. Why is that the case? I think my answer is simple, but with very complex consequences and tragic consequences. 64 years of Pakistan and US relations is a story of strategic partnerships and fallouts where ordinary people of Pakistan have really mattered very little. And of course, when ordinary people in Pakistan have mattered little, so the ordinary people in Sindh, of course, they're born in that category. For about 30 years, out of those 64 years, military has directly ruled Pakistan. And each of those military regimes has lasted for about 10 years. And it is either kind of that it was a coincidence of history or we could say the good timing or the good luck for those military regimes, that each of those military regimes was at crucial times supported and sustained by political, military, and to some degree economic support from Washington. So, in other words, throughout these 64 years, Pakistan's or the Pakistan-US relationships have mainly been Washington's relationships with Pakistan's mighty military establishment, and not so much with the people of Pakistan or other political forces. And what has happened is that in those 60 years, economic model, political model, and the social model that the Pakistan military had devised for that country, it has basically run quite against or ran quite counter to what the basis of that country are or were supposed to be. It was supposed to be a federal political structure. The military has excessively centralized power. It was supposed to be a multi-party democracy. The military has basically handpicked which political forces will be allowed to kind of be partners in the power sharing game, and also very conveniently and sometimes very brutally issued the certificates of treason for all political forces that are not to its liking. And then in a country which is very diverse, where kind of there are multiple languages, multiple ethnic groups, and all that, which is supposed to be run like that, kind of a unity in diversity kind of theme. Over there, they have tried to use religion, and in this case, a very narrow version of Islam, as a bond, which at the end of the day has divided Pakistan and Pakistanis more than it has united. So when we sometimes, like I was just kind of, when we were catching the cab here, and they were talking about on some radio here, some kind of an election talk going on in the United States, and there was, as the usual sentence, whosoever was the contender or the challenger was saying, well, elect him or her, because not everything is right in Washington, so they want to kind of do things right in Washington. I think, Washington's Pakistan policy has been one of those things that hasn't been really working well either for Pakistan or for the United States, because it has ended up, in these 64 years, it has ended up teaming up with political forces in Pakistan that have centralized the country, that have suffocated democracy, and that have tried to kind of paint Pakistanis with one big brush stroke of Muslims, when Pakistanis, yes, many of them are very practicing Muslims, but they would like Islam to be more in their personal lives and not to be used to legislate against their fellow citizens and all that. So, what is, just in the interest of time, what is it? What are the possible solutions, or what is it that the United States can do? I think, yes, individual and institutional donations, or the charitable, or the aid and grants, that is very useful, but it has to go beyond that in terms of long-term interests of both Washington and of Pakistan or Sindhis. That is, that what Washington should kind of encourage or strive for is to have more accountable systems of governance in Pakistan that is truly federal and democratic. The United States itself is a good example of successful and effective democratic and federal political system. Ironically, it has often been on the wrong side of political divide in Pakistan. There are the forces in Pakistan which have wanted it to be a vibrant federation and a democratic federation. The United States hasn't been officially supportive of those forces in times of political crises. And mainly because it was, first it was the Cold War, that Washington said, well, that's why we're going to support the first military regime. Then came the 1980s, and so, well, now that the Soviets are in Afghanistan, so again we have to support the military regime. And then after 9/11, of course, there was a long but troublesome relationship with Pervez Musharraf. So I think it is about time that the United States supported those political forces in Pakistan that want the country to be a federal democracy with equal rights for all its citizens, irrespective of their religion, gender, or ethnic background. And Southern province of Sindh has been in the forefront of movements for a federal and democratic Pakistan. One hopes that the United States would now and in future support such elements in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nisamani. In the interest of time, we'll hold the questions to the end of the briefing. I'd like to ask Dr. I'd like to ask Dr. Geeta Chenani, who's a medical doctor and who actually has gone back, after growing up in the United States, she's gone back to Sindh and is helping people in the villages of Sindh
many who've been devastated by the floods and others. So I'd like to ask her to speak briefly about her experiences there. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. I'd like to take a moment to thank Mr. Lagari for inviting LifeBridge out here to actually represent what's going on the ground. Okay, so we are, I'm here representing LifeBridge US Corp, which we registered as a 501c3 nonprofit organization in the United States in October 2010. It was actually, and is working with the subsidiary, LifeBridge Pakistan Trust, which was recently formed, which is registered under the Social Welfare Act of Pakistan. LifeBridge's mission and message is one of peace and a brotherhood bound by humanity. After having been raised in America, my identity as a Sindhi actually brought me back. I went there on a 1-month visitor visa. I wanted to find out more about my heritage, and I was there about 3 days. And a friend of mine who's actually a humanitarian, ex-humanitarian affairs officer for UNOCHA and now works for another local organization, basically said to me that some of the villages that they had adopted for sustainable livelihood projects got affected by the floods. So she was going out to do a site visit and do some provision of tents and rations and stuff, and they didn't know much about health, so she asked me if I could go with her, just to kind of make sure everything was okay. So while I was on the way there, she told me that the UN was starting to come down to Sindh, and they hadn't set up shop completely yet. They were still doing the whole visiting thing. The government of Pakistan, the government of Sindh, was working in Sindh, and a couple of the NGOs that are close partners with government had already started doing their work. But they weren't sure because the devastation was so huge. They were spread very, very thin. There's a lot of affected people. So I went down there 3 days after I got to Pakistan, and I was basically not expecting to see patients, not expecting to get caught up in flood relief. But I went there and I was walking through the tent city and I heard a baby coughing. The baby sounded like pneumonia. When I asked the field officer when was the last time the doctor was there, I was told 4 or 5 days. And this was in Chicago, Sindh. And so it was 4 or 5 days prior, and which was kind of, I mean, given the situation, I guess it was because they were spread so thin, but people should have been there regularly, whether it was the NGO or it was the government or whoever it was. There had to be a more coordinated effort. The problem was that I think that the magnitude of the disaster, it hit north, then it hit the middle, then it went all the way down south, and everybody was just kind of dispersed. They reacted the way that the disaster hit. So the least amount of energy was being given to Sindh. Meanwhile, the devastation in Sindh was ridiculous. There was 7 million people that were displaced last year. And it was taking people time to come down. So anyway, I'm walking around and it sounds like a pneumonia case, so I said, let me go listen to this child's chest and be sure whether it is pneumonia or not, because if it is, the close proximity in which they're living would cause more children to end up with pneumonia. So I said, I walked over to my car, grabbed my stethoscope, went over to go listen to the child, and literally in like a 7-foot distance between the car and myself, I was overrun by mothers. Mothers with little babies, little infants, less than a year old, all coming up to me and basically speaking in Sindhi and saying, can you please see my child? See my child first. See my child first. One of the things that worked towards my benefit massively, and I guess made it so easy for me to just kind of immerse myself, is the fact that I speak Sindhi fluently. So it was very easy for me to kind of understand their problems. So once they understood I was a doctor, I understood their problems, I was a female. Dominantly, all women, maternal and child health cases, were coming up to me. A lot of, normally, women don't seek care in interior regions of Sindh. They don't, it's a cultural, it's a cultural, I don't want to say problem because, they're okay with it, but I mean, medically it's a problem. they don't go out and seek care because they have to be chaperoned for long distances from their villages into the hospitals, and so they normally won't seek the care. What they'll do is they'll stay there and they'll use traditional birth attendants, and then end up in very horrible situations where they're basically bleeding out during pregnancy. You know, you're giving birth to stillborn children. A lot of other, like sepsis, neonatal sepsis is a big issue. Low birth weight is a big issue. Malnutrition is a big issue. All stuff that's related with maternal and child health. If the mother is not able to seek care, she will not take her child to the hospital. Men, on the other hand, obviously they're more aggressive and it's okay and whatever, so they go and they seek out the care. So you tend to see a lot of infants and mothers and pregnant and lactating women that are having problems. So that was the overabundance of what I was seeing when I was in this tent city. And while I was there, I decided to start doing wellness camps for these women, which was very, again, ad hoc. Nothing that was planned. We were just going about it, and I asked these women if they were getting prenatal care, and they were like, no. And they were well into their 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th months. So I said, you know, you guys need to get some shots, you guys need to get some supplements. So we actually started doing these little wellness camps. I mean, they weren't amazing, but it was better than what they were getting. So, so that's how it ended up happening. And then when I was actually seeing these people, it turns out that 100% of the tent city was sick. There were 1,100 people, and all 1,100 were sick. The range of illness was different. Some people were, 10%, 15% sick. Some people were very, very sick. The very, very sick ones got referred out, and we took them over to government hospitals. In Shikarpur, it was a district-level Shikarpur hospital, which we were working with. In Sapac, we had to take them to a private medical center. And in Ranipur, we were actually transferring them into Shikarpur, which was because the Ranipur hospital was over, it was inundated, basically. It was over, it was stretched too far, it didn't have enough doctors, it didn't have enough, so they had too much going on. Even here at medical center, the private medical centers were also in full capacity, beyond it. They had 4 people on one bed, 4 children on one bed, sorry. So anyway, at some point I actually started seeing a high prevalence of vaccine preventable diseases, hepatitis, TB, measles. I found a measles case in Ranipur at a tent city, which I had to take to the hospital. Again, a lot of issues that once again have to do with maternal and child health, and just a lack of understanding. It's unfortunate, but because of the language barriers, when people go in to intervene in the villages, not all of them are necessarily Sindhi speaking. And that creates a huge language barrier for them to understand. In order for people to respond and understand the concept of clean water, or sanitation, or ways to prevent acute watery diarrhea at home, or brushing your teeth, little simple hygiene messages, open defecation, all these things are very, they're very, within, on a community level, they're very handleable. Wrong word, but that's what that means. You can deal with it, you can sit down, they're responsive, they want to know. The issue just is the fact that they don't understand, unless you're speaking to them in Sindhi. And not handing out messages, because that won't work either. It's got to be actually sitting down and talking to them. And interventions when you're planning or starting to implement, before you implement the program. One of the things that a party message from my side, for anybody involved in this, is to go in and to talk to them on a community level. What do they need? Because if we're sitting in Karachi and we're deciding, or in Islamabad, and we're talking about putting in water pumps, when they don't want a water pump, they have a bigger problem like shelter, or they would rather have somebody visiting them for maternal and child health, then that should be the intervention that we're doing, and then they take ownership over that. They will feel like it's actually something that they want to do and they want to be a part of. So I have to wrap up, but yeah. So I guess my party message is definitely that language and intervention should be community-based. And just before I stop for 2 seconds, the devastation of Medina is taking over. It's horrendous. The last message that I really do need to pass is Lifebridge's Pakistan team was just on ground in Badin twice. We did an assessment. People are in spontaneous camps. They don't have tents. They are living under the open sky. We actually have pictures. If you go towards the last couple of slides. So just pass this by. Yes. Spontaneous settlements off the roadside. They're just basically using their own sheets. What we really do need to focus in on them. We need to zero in on them. It's not enough. There was not enough media attention last year for the 7 million that were affected. There's definitely not enough this year. I mean, it's not even on the radar. And it's hard for me to fathom as an American that when we see Haiti and we see everything else, we see nothing about Pakistan, and I'm on the ground on Pakistan. I know how miserable this is. We have malnutrition numbers that are being compared to the Great African Famine, and yet it's not anywhere on the news radar. So I urge and I hope, and I'm asking all of you, Pakistani, American, Indian, Sindhi, it doesn't really matter. Just bring it to whoever's attention that you can, because this is, like UNICEF has said, it is a humanitarian disaster of epic proportions, and it really does need some attention.
Can I ask that your testimony be submitted to the Congressional record so that people can see it? And could I ask as well that you go and brief the Women's Caucus as well as the Congressional Human Rights Caucus? It shouldn't stop here.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, you can show the other last two pictures, and then Dr. Flum can take over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chenani. I think we appreciate your work and your passion and sharing your photographs. It's very good. Now, I'd like to introduce Professor Louis Pham, who is a professor of archaeology and South Asian studies at City University of New York. He will provide us with a little background of Sindh and give you perhaps a better understanding of the Sindhi community that we've spoken about. And we'll try to save a little time at the end for questions as well. Thank you.
My name is Louis Pham, and I'm an archaeologist. And I teach at the City University of New York at Lehman College in the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. And I've been working in Sindh for 37 years. I've been exploring the Kirtar Mountains on the border of Baluchistan and Sindh during those years. Made very close friends with the tribal chiefs, which is the only way I could get to do things like that. I've been the guest of the Khan of Kalat, gone all the way to the Iranian border to do explorations, looking for prehistoric sites and the origins of the Indus civilization, which in my eyes and with many other colleagues also is actually the origins of Sindhi culture. And right now, according to our excavations at a site that I'm excavating in Pakistan called Ghazi Shah, which is in Dadu district, the civilization goes back at least 6,000 BC, which means 8,000 years ago, several thousands of years before Mohenjo-Daro, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. I usually go to Pakistan every year. And last January, I was there for the entire month in the interior of Sindh. And I was devastated by what I saw from the results of the flood, which had occurred 4 months earlier. I'll show a couple of pictures that agricultural fields and villages were completely swamped. If there was a building where there was no water, the water line was 6 to 10 feet high. 6 to 10 feet high. One year, I brought a student from Lehman College with me to Ghazi Shah to excavate. And on our way up to Ghazi Shah through Dadu district, we were sitting in my Toyota Land Cruiser, and he kept shaking his head like this. I said, "What's the matter, Ron?" And he said, "People in the Bronx don't know what poverty is." The situation was bad before. It's even worse now. And I've been receiving, thank you for the cell phone, you mentioned the cell phone, telephone calls from people at Ghazi Shah and throughout the villages in Larkana and Dadu districts and even in Badin. Our houses have collapsed. And they're in desperate need of everything. Not one thing, but everything. Absolutely everything. Food, clean water, I remember my father used to recite an adage, water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. And there is literally in Sindh, water, water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. It's all putrid, and they're only going to get sick from drinking it. And I've seen these tent cities. There aren't just one or two here and there. They're all over the place. There are no roads. Everything has been destroyed. That was in January. Now it's even worse.
Those are the roads, by the way. And those are the destroyed houses. And we also found out that Dadu has very high levels of arsenic in the water, just to add to Dr. Flem's thing.
So the situation is really desperate. In fact, I'm here today in Washington, but next Friday I'll be sending thousands of dollars of my own money from my salary and savings to the villagers that I know in Dadu and Larkana district so they can start rebuilding their houses and just get food. Things are tremendously desperate. And I'm tired of hearing on the news how all Pakistanis hate Americans. I traveled throughout Sindh last January. Not one bit of trouble, without a police escort. So I was in close to the mountains of Baluchistan. I was on both sides of the Indus River. Everybody just greeted me like I was a brother. And they asked me, where are you from? I'm an American. Oh, that's wonderful. And at least in Sindh, nobody hates Americans. Even in Karachi, I go to Sarafa Bazaar, Bolton Market, Juna Bazaar, the older parts of Karachi, and I never have any problems with people. And I also, as the other speakers mentioned, was also ashamed that on the nightly news, and I tried CBS, ABC, and NBC, nothing about the floods in Sindh. Nothing. I had to watch the BBC to learn about the floods in Sindh and rely on telephone calls from friends in Pakistan to tell me what was happening. So what I'd like to do is just share a few photographs with you of the people and some of the villages. Yeah. Can you go back to the flowers? To the fields? Next one. Next one. Next one. Yeah. This one. These are their fields. I took this picture about 5 years ago on the floodplain of the Indus River just to get a picture of what the fields are like. And I remembered I took this picture, and last January when I was there, this is what it looked like. The same fields. The same fields. And this was 4 months after the flood. And it's even worse this year. These are pictures of the area that I'm exploring. Okay, yeah. And these are just pictures of Sindhi people from all over Sindh, from the mountains close to Baluchistan to the Tar Desert and to the floodplain area. Okay. Should we have a question?
He wants to go.
All right, so thank you very much for your presentation. I'd like to first...
Sorry. Thank you very much for your presentation, and I would now like to open the floor for questions for the members of the panel. Please raise your hand and we'll go from there. Thank you. Do we have a mic, by the way, for...
No, but we can hear it.
Are there any questions? Okay, well, if there are not any, then I will ask questions. Well, Geeta, since I rushed you, I know you had a lot more to speak about the devastation, the flooding, and the access to medical care. I want to know what, I know your organization is doing quite a bit to help the women who traditionally don't seek medical care. But is there any way, or are you working at all with the government and other NGOs to also try to get more support instead of it being, a one-woman show, pretty much?
Okay, the issue that I've been having is the government facilitates, but it is spread, as I said, very thin. They're having problems meeting their own existing programs. So they don't have the kind of funding that would be able to support that. Government meaning government of Pakistan. Now, government of the United States, the USAID proposals, I actually did go back and forth for a little bit with them because they have a special funding opportunity for people involved in emergency relief. It's called a RAPID program, which is being monitored by Concern International in Pakistan. And that's all I did. I basically went back and forth with them because I'm in the field and I can't be playing this paper pushing game back and forth with them. So it was exhausting basically. It's a 3-month, it's a funding program for 3 months that is supposed to just basically be emergency relief. It does not allow you to allocate any type of assets or anything. Basically it's supposed to be used solely to see the patients or to, facilitate you getting into the field. And I was going back and forth with them for 5 months. So I don't know what the purpose of that emergency relief funding was 5 months after I had already been in place. So I don't know. So there's it's difficult. It's hard. You have to have a very heavy capacity in order to be able to apply to these funding opportunities that they have. Aside from that, NGOs, yes, we were partnered prior in our last project. We were partnered with the Real Medicine Foundation. We've been talking to another existing organization, actually 2 of them. And we're kind of just trying to find a happy medium where we both are comfortable working because everybody has their own intervention of choice. So, but yeah, we're looking to expand on that. Yes.
Okay, I did want to let everyone know that Congressman Bashir will be arriving shortly, so please to stay here. I have a question from the gentleman here.
Thank you very much. My name is Nasser. I'm not from Pakistan side, Iranian side. Well, we both like Sindh and we always feel the same.
I've actually been to Balochistan.
Yes, of course. My question was that you talked about terrorism in Romania in Pakistan, and it has been always a question in Pakistan. And there has been some alliances before, especially between Baloch, Pashtun, and Bengali, when the same development by the People's Party at the time, which was trying to be government party in Pakistan sometimes. And now, how do you see this? Because if Pakistan is supposed to be a federation, how do you see the relationship working together between those ethnic groups like Baloch, Pashtun, and Sindhis, who are more wanting federation than Punjabis maybe, because Punjabis control our really the central government somehow, through the army and the other instruments that they have. How do you see how it's developing? I know there have been some try, but now that is more needed than ever.
Well, I mean, it's any answer or any short answer to such a complex question would be simplistic. So please do keep that in mind. Pakistan's federation, it is a troubled federation. Is that the constituent units, even after 64 years, they haven't reached mutually agreed upon amicable model to run it as an effective federation. And that is mainly, it is because the 2 institutions that have directly and indirectly ruled, like the military and the civilian bureaucracy, their interests are not in a vibrant federation. So it is always complicated. So one is how to come up with a constitutional mechanism, which is kind of a user manual that will be acceptable to all constituent units. There's been some progress in past 3 or 4 years to treat with the user manual, namely the Constitution of Pakistan, to run it more as a federation than as a centralized state. But the fear or the concern is that at all 3 occasions, when the military takes over and it stays in power for next 10 years, it really doesn't care that great deal about the Constitution. So the question is always kind of a twofold. A, how to have a user manual that will be acceptable to everyone. B, how to make sure, or at least minimize the chances of a military takeover. There is, again, I mean, like I said, I'm not that optimistic in terms of the strength of political forces as they exist now in preventing or very effectively challenging if there is a military takeover. So that's the sad part. And I think, I mean, I said probably the answer is buried in your question. It is to have political forces organized in a manner that they can rise above their, you can say, the petty or interest and prevent direct military rule and let country function as a federation.
Yes.
I have a question about that
If
life.
you don't mind just giving your name and where you
Oh,
are.
my name is Omar Abbasi. I'm from North Carolina. I'm a U.S. citizen, and my concern is that Dr. Geeta is doing a lot of work, and for the even rapid response kind of funding takes 5 months, and she's being American, being on the ground, and what could be done? You know, we can push to USAID to build that relationship, and there is money. It's already passed. Every legislative member is telling us there are hundreds of millions of dollars already allocated, approved.
Yeah,
And if it's
they said that yesterday, 7.5 billion that's been approved, out of which we only got 2 billion to Pakistan.
yeah, and
I don't know if they were
300
talking about Pakistan specifically or Sindh or how that was going.
Yeah, I heard that there are like 370 something millions and only 18 millions for release.
Yes, that's true.
Yes.
That's the UN appeal though.
Yeah,
The UN appeal requested 345 million, out of which only 17.5 has been
yeah.
approved, right?
So what could be done from here is us, and we can work together with Sapac and working with the lawmakers to push it and build the relationship. So this could be done. Money is there. It's already been allocated.
Mhm.
It should be given to the people at the time of need.
Yeah, I think.
Sounds like it's $1
I
short
think-
in daily.
Yeah. Sorry. I think what needs to get done is that people need to know what's going on.
Yeah.
See, we can't say anything to anybody about what's happening unless we present it to them. Look, we have this issue. There's 7 million people that are in Sindh that are looking like this. They're living in these spontaneous settlements on the roadside. We need to do something. And we need to keep saying that and keep saying that until we turn blue in the face so that somebody does something. This way it'll at least motivate them to start saying, wait a second, 7.5, what's going on, if this is happening in Sindh. You have to start that trend of thought. That's the only thing that I can think of. We can't force anybody to do anything. It's obviously everybody else's discretion. At their discretion is when they choose to fund and how they fund. But we have to do our part in letting them know that this is a reality on the ground. And that means that I suggest that, you guys as Sindhis, Pakistani citizens in America, American citizens, actively get involved and do, on the side. I know that everybody knows what's going on in Sindh. I know that all of you guys know. Just tell them. Let them know. Tell Mr. Lagari. He'll tell everybody.
Can I comment on this very important question that a gentleman from North Carolina asked? The congressional approval has already been done. A lot of money has been allocated. Some of it in pipeline projects, they are obviously not related to floods. They are, a variety of long-term, short-term, and that type of a thing. If you want action, we have a couple of departments where we have to show that's what we want. One is the USA. I mean, they have got leverage, they have got certain allocations, and they are responsible for providing emergency, as they did, as you remember, in Haiti. They went all the way. So we have to focus that. We Sindhi community, American Sindhi community, have to go and press, write letters, telephones, whatever means we can find through our Congress representatives, ask them to write letters.
That's right.
That's what I would request Mr. Lagari to ask them. And the State Department, because these are the two. Very recently, for example, education was a big problem, and we, a lot of Sindhis acted on that, and some an agreement very recently was signed with the Sindh government. So there is venue, and we just know where to go. Pushing Congress is very important, but it will have an impact in the long run. Immediately, we need to push the executive branch, and these are
So, my name is Shahid. I'm also from North Carolina. My question is, again, I'm advocate of long-term rehabilitation of Sindhi people, not short-term money funding just for flooding and all. We emphasizing on flooding, but my emphasis more on long-term education for Sindhi kids, Sindhi people, which is very important for the future of Sindh.
We actually are working on programs as such. So, but the reason why we're focusing on the floods is because it's emergent. It's a big problem right now. I can't realistically, and within my own realm, I'm sorry, I'm trying to say this as respectfully as possible, I cannot go into a village and tell a child to go to school when he's starving. And that's the reality right now. We have millions of starving children. We have children that are sick. We have parents that don't have an income. So at this point, the education thing is agreed, imperative, and we were working on it prior to the floods. We were actually working on a program where we were going to start a school in Sindh, because we feel that obviously Sindh is the education is the actual answer to many of the problems. But again, how am I supposed to convince a child that in the villages to go to school when the mother doesn't have the money, the father doesn't have a job, and they're starving and they're sick?
I understand that. The implication of not looking long-term perspectives of Sindh is more dangerous than looking into the flood aspects. I know people are starving. People were starving before flood also. There were people who weren't getting enough. There were malnutrition. There were water shortages. There were diseases in water.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what I'm looking into a longer picture in terms of going and changing a cultural change in Sindh, basically creating a model village.
I think USC has taken.
I kind of say agree. And I think both these focuses, they are not necessarily one at the cost of the other.
They're together.
They're together. And precisely in this kind of sort of long-term solution or the long-term mechanisms in place, because we had flooding last year, same areas, and were hit even worse this time, and kind of even more areas underwater. In about 2003 or 4, again kind of a coastal cycle hit again the coastal areas of Badin and all that. They were worse affected. Here is a long-term or one thing that probably, I mean, like say again, all of us here and those, because there's sometimes some things which are put in place in the name of development, they can be having exact opposite impact. I mean, like say, one word that if God, and like one thing is that, well, if it was sort of floods or the rains, well, let's blame it on God. It would have been really nice only if God was to be blamed on it. These are partly man-made disasters. And the one thing, or the one issue, which is every affectee in the coastal areas, because they are the worst affected, they know that it is what they call LBOD, the left bank outfall drainage. It is a mega drainage project that was funded by World Bank and Asian Development Bank, and of course constructed and then handed over to the government of Pakistan. This is an example where unaccountable international and national bureaucracies, they teamed up without consulting the local people in a project that has regularly caused these immense miseries. I mean, like if you take the LBOD factor out, hypothetically, the destruction would be far less in Sindh than it is now. So there is a growing movement in Sindh, in the country, to decommission LBOD. Because if it continues, you are going to, no matter what is the scale of rains, we will be again here in 2012. Again, I mean, like I said, putting the figures out, well, this is 6 million or 4 million. How many are displaced, how many are not? But if we do not talk about LBOD, if we do not organize or team up with the forces in Pakistan that want that mega project to be decommissioned, this is a misery and a disaster waiting to happen year after year. So LBOD, that is one of the long-term solutions.
I would like to welcome Congressman Brad Sherman to our panel today, to our discussion. He has been, he's the co-chair of the Congressional Sindh Caucus, and he has been a huge supporter of the Sindhi community. He also spoke at our dinner last night, and I welcome him to make a few comments here today. Thank you.
City, Sherman Oaks. With me here is Sapac Kurdistani, who knows something about what it is to be part of an ethnic minority in the Middle East. And if you want to be kept informed of what we're doing on Sindh issues, please give him your email address or your business card. I wish I could have been here for the entire conference. We have simultaneous hearings of both the Financial Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee right now, and that has delayed me. And I don't know, do you want the 3-minute version or the 8-minute version?
As you like.
What do you got?
8 minutes is good.
I don't have to tell you that relations between the United States and Pakistan are under considerable strain. Pakistan is a nuclear state at the center of the most problem area of the world, and so it is critically important that we reach out to the Sindh community. This is a historically oppressed part of the Pakistani population. And its population, influenced by Sufism, has an approach to Islam that is quite consistent with American ideals of democracy, freedom, and compassion. We founded the Sindhi Caucus scarcely a bit over a year ago. Dan Burton is my co-chair. Adam Schiff was, I think, the first to join. And we look forward to focusing the attention of Congress on Sindh. I know our focus today is on the floods, but let me first talk about the need to have the Voice of America broadcast in the Sindhi language. Our outreach to the Pakistani people tends to be in just one language. That's Urdu. Urdu is spoken by fewer people than speak Sindhi. Some 12% of Pakistanis speak the Sindhi language. We have a budget of $750 million to broadcast to the world, and I can't think of a more important population to reach than the Sindhi population concentrated in southern Pakistan. That's why 2 months ago I offered an amendment to the House Foreign Affairs Authorization Committee to require that the Voice of America broadcast in the Sindhi language. That, however, is just at the committee level. That is not binding law on the administration. But it shows that the committee is dedicated, it was a unanimous vote, to seeing broadcasts in the Sindhi language. Most of the input I'm getting indicates that this should be done from the United Arab Emirates on AM, also known as medium wave broadcast. We are being told by the Voice of America that there's been a decline in radio ownership in southern Pakistan, since the radios are considerably less expensive than televisions. I found this very surprising, and I look forward to your input as to whether the average Sindhi-speaking family, particularly in rural Sindh, owns a family radio or more. Another thing to keep in mind is that radio broadcasts can be received from the ubiquitous telephone/personal devices, and so you can't just count the radios, you've got to count the radio receiving devices. And I am sure that radio remains important. Otherwise, why is that same Board of Governors asking for $750 million every year for the purpose chiefly of broadcasting on radio to various places around the world? As to the floods, I'm deeply concerned about the humanitarian tragedy that unfolded in the Sindh province and that compounded last year's floods. I pressed Secretary Hillary Clinton to do everything possible to expedite the flow of U.S. international aid supplies, particularly in the hard-hit areas in Sindh. The floods, which began this August, have killed over 400 people, the majority in Sindh province, destroyed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of homes, displaced 2 million people. Sadly, despite the commendable generosity of the American people, the situation does remain perilous. The people of Sindh are particularly suffering, and this has affected all 23 districts in the Sindh province. The USAID should be credited for immediately undertaking an aid mission to the region. We've got to do more. 2 years ago, Congress authorized $7.5 billion in civilian aid, of which approximately only $2 billion has actually been dispersed. We ought to be able to use those funds to deal with those suffering from this natural disaster. Last year, with the historic 2010 Pakistan floods, I pressured and pushed the administration to do everything possible for Sindh, and particularly the rural areas of Sindh. As you know, an estimated 20 million people were affected, and my letter and that we organized from others went to Secretary Clinton and, of course, the head of International Development, USAID, Dr. Shah. The response we received from USAID was that they had at least provided $2 million to a local partner in Sindh that they prefer not to identify. I should mention the human rights abuses and the disappearances in Sindh. Individuals involved with the Sindhi nationalist parties have been jailed and tortured for political activities, while Amnesty International reports hundreds of those cases. Other human rights organizations in Baluchistan and Sindh cite much higher numbers. I've urged President Zardari to investigate these cases and bring to justice those who are responsible. I have also urged Pakistan to ratify the International Convention on the Protection of All Persons and Enforced Disappearances. In conclusion, I think that there's simply nothing more important for the United States to do than to build a relationship with the Sindhi people, particularly at this critical time, and given Pakistan's unique national security profile. And I look forward to building that alliance and friendship between the Sindhi people and the American people. And let me just say, Sindh.
Thank you, Congressman. Do you have time to take a question or
You
two?
can take a question or two.
Sure. Does anybody have?
Easy question.
I was just kind of concerned when you said that the money is distributed to a partner whom they decline to identify. Monitoring the use of these funds and preventing corruption is one of the major problems. And I think it's shocking that they will not even identify their local.
There's an attitude in the executive branch that we should simply trust them to do the monitoring, and that they don't really want us monitoring their monitoring. So it does not mean that they don't know, it does not mean that they're not monitoring. It is simply that they're not anxious to see us monitoring. Now, the other part of this, or the implication, is that somehow a local entity in Sindh that was officially identified as receiving American funds could be the target of certain extremist groups. So, frankly, what would have been the minimum protocol here is to offer, and I'm sure if I pressed, they would offer, to tell me the name of the group in a classified hearing. But they come check it. I don't have a complete list in my mind of all the NGOs operating in Sindh and which do a good job and which do a bad job. And so then I would know the name, and I want to ask Sufi here, and you, whether that was an effective group, and I'd be prohibited from law. So I guess, thinking this through, if I got a list of the 50 most effective organizations in Sindh, and then I went into the classified briefing, I'd be able to see whether they were on the list. But absent that process, we're dealing with $2 million here. That's a small portion of what we're spending in Sindh, and I hope we're spending it effectively. I can only report to you what I said.
And also the congressman mentioned yesterday that there are possible security issues too. Anyone who's a friend of the U.S.
That's what I'm saying. I can't put on the internet the following organization operating in Sindh is being funded by the United States unless that organization tells me that they want that posting. And you know, here in this country, we have a certain amount of difference between the average Democrat and the average Republican. The spread of different political opinion. I've never seen any country with as much difference in political opinion. From human rights activists to people who want to stone those accused of blasphemy. It's a real extreme.
Any other questions for the congressman?
Congressman, thank you very much for your consistent and constant support for many years, as we have observed, and we have throughout the United States, we have sort of passed on that message to support you, your campaign, and people who help you to get. My question is that you gave us a very good briefing on the short-term, actions that you are taking and are imminent, and that is really forcing the executive branch, are pressuring the executive branch to do more, especially from the funds. Would you tell us what is in your plans in terms of a long-term, betterment of the people of Sindh and Sindh?
Well, you may be overestimating how quickly I can get anything done, or anybody can get anything done in Washington. And what you say are short-term, and I think that's going to be taking many, many months, perhaps a couple of years. I would hope that the Sindhi community will find a unique opportunity right now to deal with presidential candidates. Whoever gets the Republican nomination will never be as accessible. Now, I do not identify Iowa as the center of the U.S. and the Sindhi community, but any 4 or 5 people who show up in the right place in Iowa can have the year of somebody who will be the Republican nominee. Now, you have to go to 3 or 4 and figure you've covered all the bases, but it is easier to fly to Iowa today than it is to get into the White House in 2013. Now, it's only 50-50 chance. I do, 40, wait, I'm a Democrat. There's such a small chance that Obama will lose the election that this is, of course, a waste of your time. This message brought to you by the Democratic Party.
Any last question for the congressman?
Congressman, just a couple suggestions. Regarding USAID, the Sindhi community already is mobilizing, raising funds for the floods. I know they do matching, partnerships. Like if we raise on 200,000, USAID can do 200,000. So we want to establish a partnership with USAID. We already have several NGOs that we've identified and we are working with. one presented before you came in, LifeBridge US. You met Dr. Deechanand yesterday. But if you can write to Dr. Rajiv Shah, and we'll write to Dr. Rajiv Shah, creating a partnership with USAID, and say, you know what, you're not going this alone. Community's coming in with you, with money, but match it.
You write the letter, hand it to CMAC, he'll revise the letter, he'll put it on my desk, I'll revise the letter, I'll sign the letter.
Okay.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite any last questions for the panelists before we end our session. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for attending, and we appreciate the comments of the panelists and your questions. Thank you.